Nikita Mittal is a physiotherapist by profession. Later, she pursued dance therapy, which is a creative art therapy approach to mental health care. She is a founder of the dance fitness brand DanzoFit. She is also a co-founder of India's first dance movement therapy course approved by SSPU. I think you will know more about this course during our talk, and you can ask her questions about that as well in the Q&A box. She has been contributing towards the effort to bring affordable dance therapy sessions to India.
First of all, Dr. Nina and the entire team at Margika, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor and a pleasure because it's just that it's opening up so many more minds and doors and windows to the use of movement therapy in mainstream healthcare. So as all of you heard that I started off my career as a physiotherapist and I spent many years working with special needs children. In my career as a pediatric rehab therapist, I realized that there was so much focus in India for children to actually walk and develop milestones, but there was hardly any work happening around emotional and social rehabilitation of children and primary caregivers who were inflicted with various kinds of neurological issues, developmental delays, etc. So that led me on the path of questioning that, this child may walk, but will he ever have a sound mind? This child may run, but will he have an intact self-image? Will he have confidence? Dance was always something that I was passionate about. So in my clinic, I started doing some group therapy sessions intuitively with my own patients. I would every Saturday take 4, 5 children or 10 children in a group and conduct some fun activities. Some were on a wheelchair, some were on a walker, some were standing, some were probably just mildly delayed. That led me on a very different path of thought process where I realized that this is what these children want. In fact, their life was so depressing because all I did as a therapist was expect them to walk up, walk karo, walk karo, walk karo. And even the family only had one expectation: when are you going to walk? When is he going to speak? Then the children who came for my group sessions realized that nothing is expected of us. That was the 1 hour in the week when they could just smile without having the burden of or the anxiety of performing. And can you imagine a child's life who's 7 years old, 10 years old, who's constantly made anxious that you are not good at this? And we don't do it consciously, but subconsciously, we're continuously pressurizing these children. The second benefit that I can think of and that I have widely also seen, like say, for example, when I work with a cerebral palsy child, a child who's paraplegic or diplegic or hemiplegic or quadriplegic, what happens in a typical physical therapy session, because I've done it myself, is that there is a sense of repetition to the point of boredom. What you can do in a dance movement therapy session is when you add music and you add movement to that music, you actually can encourage a child to override that sense of repetition, boredom, and anxiety to enter a zone of free exploration. And when a child or a person with special needs is allowed and given the confidence to explore, he might do wonders and might do wonders beyond expectations. So I'd like to give an example, as you said. So, imagine working with a child on a wheelchair who's really not able to do much. Why even a child? I've worked with adults who are quadriplegic on a wheelchair. If you've been to Pune, you know that we have the Kirky Center for soldiers who have been injured in war. It's basically a paraplegic rehab center for soldiers who have been shot in the spine and now are wheelchair bound. Now, these people are primarily, we're focusing कि maintenance therapy is the main thing, right? Maintain range of motion, maintain muscle strength. But when we're talking about exploration, we're bringing the avenue or the opportunity for them to imagine a life outside of the cage of their body. And I have seen that some of these children and adults have actually gone beyond their range of motion or their so-called muscle strength to be able to explore. Like if I tell a child, lift your hands, it becomes a chore or it becomes mechanical. But if I tell a child to think of it like he's experiencing a rainbow, or if he was flying like a bird, so a natural sense of relaxation in a spastic muscle will allow much more function, for example. Then when you're working with children with autism, the primary issue with autism is that they do not socially engage. They do not have eye contact, or they have repetitive behaviors, or they have self-stimulating behaviors. How can you then engage with this child? So using his own body in a way that he can self-soothe, so giving a lot of proprioception, using music and movement. And the primary tool of dance movement therapy is to build a movement empathy relationship or a rapport with my client or with my patient. So some of these things are actually have made me realize that rehabilitation in India needs a lot of more steps ahead. But the open-mindedness of doctors and therapists is something that I haven't tried to challenge yet. It's just a cumbersome process.
Mhm. And I mean, this is very interesting. Like, especially when you're dealing with children who have, like, I mean, some of the special needs children may have some difficulty with motor skills. So, do you also combine your physiotherapy self, or a physiotherapist also comes into play while doing this dance therapy, or dance therapy can be used exclusively? I mean, without having to use physiotherapy also. I mean, how does it work? Have you, I mean, can you quote any examples with respect to this?
So when I'm working, it really depends on the goal that I have set for the client and with the doctor, with the therapist, and for myself. If this patient is already going to a physiotherapist, then I will not bring in my physiotherapy self in the session. My goals will purely be either behavioral, like the child needs to work on temper, or he needs to work on impulse control, or we are working on improving social skills. So then my goals are very different, and I do not need to do physical rehabilitation. But when, like, say, for example, when we were working with COVID patients, my goals were extremely integrating my physical therapy work along with dance therapy, because in physical therapy, we were actually working on improving lung capacity, improving the ability of this patient to breathe, oxygen inhalation, etc., chest expansion, and using those exercises to actually work with fear, psychosis, working with anxiety of these patients. So really depends on the situation and also depends from patient to patient. But all dance therapists don't have to be physiotherapists. 99.99% of dance therapists are generally purely dance therapists, and they can focus on all of this, as well as have some knowledge of, anyways, the body is moving, right? So there will be some building of range of motion, the body will move, so there will be a sense of release of endorphins. So those benefits are always there. Counseling for dance therapists, because they're realizing the importance of having somebody with a versatile skill set on their team. So we're looking at replacing a lot of the traditional dance teachers in schools. Rather than teaching Bollywood dance in schools, why don't we bring therapeutic movement? Because that benefits a child's overall development.
Next question is, I want to learn as I work with young adults with special needs. How does it work, especially in case of non-verbal autism?
Okay. So one of the primary issues of autism is always an issue with ability to control their own sense of body or understand their sense of space, where I am in space. And if using dance movement therapy and using the approaches that we have in dance movement therapy, I can give them a sense of self. Then I have gotten an insight into the patient's mind and heart. So the primary thing we use with children with nonverbal autism is movement empathy. So if the child has rocking movement as his primary way of, expressing himself, then as a therapist, we also move with the patient. But this is not an imitative rocking. The rocking has to be done differently. So I'm so sorry, but it's a little dicey for me to give you these things on a webinar because these are extremely structured
Right.
approaches. But I'll give you a hint: use movement empathy and be with the baby, be with the child, rather than if the child is moving and you are sitting still and telling the child, don't move, don't move, don't move, don't move. That's not going to help. Movement is his comfort space. Stopping to move is not going to be a solution. So you move with the child and find how this movement is giving you a sense of connection, building a rapport and trust between you and the child, and then using that movement to then gradually take him to where you want to take him to. But this takes really long. It's a process and you have to be very patient.
Yeah. So now there are two more questions. One is, I think we can answer that probably jointly. One is about, how you can take this to the rural areas in India. And one is about, is it possible to involve HI children?
What is
I don't
HI?
know what's HI. Yeah. Maybe, but we'll look at the how this can be taken to rural areas in the villages.
I love to answer that question, Dr. Nina. So, as part of my work, I got invited by the Disability Commissioner of Pune, and he invited me to multiple conferences to train teachers from the rural areas of Latur and of other Anganwadi workers, the teachers who are working in government schools in the villages, of how to use movement not only as a diagnostic but also as a treatment measure in their schools. So definitely we need some government involvement, and we can train them in early diagnostic. There is a whole Anganwadi workers are anyways being trained, but with this tool it becomes much more accessible. I had some 500 teachers attend a seminar for 2 days on how to use dance as a tool of education from the rural schools, tool of education in their classrooms for children who are blind, hearing impaired, and there was, I think, of course, there was children with physical disabilities. So I've already done a little bit of this work. I'm very interested in doing more, but I don't have the bandwidth to access the government agencies because there's just a lot of work there, and I probably don't have the right connect. But it's beautiful because then you can touch masses when you're doing teachers training, especially. The idea is to train the teachers because you can't create thousands of therapists, but thousands of teachers can be trained at a go. Hearing impaired is wonderful. So I have already done a couple of sessions with blind kids and dance therapy. They're fabulously received. Second is hearing impaired. What we do with hearing impaired children is that prior to the session, we understand that there are some children who are not completely deaf and mute. Some have partial hearing. So they become the anchors for the rest. And they also help you to co-facilitate the sessions. Of course, they're very receptive to sign language. So learning basic sign language will help, especially if you're working with them over a period of time. The second thing about hearing impaired children is that they don't need music. We use a lot of body rhythms. So, using tapping, clapping, body rhythms, and then rhythms of a group was very well received with them. So there's no hassle. If blind can do it, hearing impaired can do it.
Great.